Yo, what's up, good people? It's your boy 3 Stacks in this thing, baby, representing Team Kings of Games. And today, I would like to talk to you guys about something that I feel most people have neglected to acknowledge. And I want to talk about the impact that spirals have had on the format and how we play Yu-Gi-Oh! That shifted the entirety of how we play the game, and it lingered to the point where the impact is still clearly evident and transparent to this day. The format has not been the same ever since full power spirals existed. They absolutely changed the game. I'm not going to take very long, but we're going to try to do a quick little thorough analysis on how the format currently is. I digress. It's not like how it was when full power spirals were out. It actually has changed, and it's evolved to the point where the format's not like cancer or anything, but it's definitely way more powerful. The decks currently out now are way more powerful and sometimes more degenerate than how full power spirals are, but it's not to take away how good spirals are, because they're an incredible deck and they really did change the game. So the impact that spirals had on the format. So let's compare the format that we're in right now. The format that we're currently in right now, it's pretty diverse, right? We have quite a few control decks still running around in the format, but a vast majority of the playing field has adapted and evolved into combo-eccentric decks that are very efficient in their tactics and are actually producing really nice turn one boards, enabling a lot of disruptions. Some of them, in fact, are denying you the right from playing Yu-Gi-Oh!, which is pretty degenerate. I mean, even full power spirals, you could still play, you had a chance, but these days, people are just dropping an azethot on you and telling you good luck, have fun, and there's nothing fun about it. But the format that we're in now, you see a lot more diverse decks out in the playing field. But at the same time, there was a point in time not too long ago where people felt like you didn't need hand traps. But again, I would like to counter that, because the way the format has been for the past year or so has actually been, you've seen hand traps being played more than they've ever been played. And now let's go ahead and talk about spirals, and here's the reason why. So prior to the initial inception of Spiral Double Helix hitting the forefront of the meta and taking the meta by storm, and spirals being the absolute most, uncontested dominant force of the format, before that, you did not really see a lot of hand traps being played in most people's decks. In fact, hand trap decks were not really prevalent and weren't seen, and it was so abnormal to see more than just Ash Blossom and Ghost Ogre in your deck. So in full power Zodiac format and around in Dracos and stuff, what most people would play was Ash Blossom, Ghost Ogre, and Maxi, which was very common. But a lot of people, even like me, we knew that around that time, Cypher and Gear Gamma, Joel and Lockbird, and Effect Veiler were still hand traps that existed that could also be incorporated as a, something like an integration to any of your other decks or the strategy that you were piloting. But people didn't play that many hand traps. When spirals came around, it was one of those decks like think of like Pepe, but we can't compare Spiral to Pepe because Pepe is actually just way more legendary. But when spirals came around, the combo that they were producing was absolutely so powerful that if it went uncontested, your opponent had a sliver of a chance of winning. A sliver of a chance of winning. Dude, it's so hard to actually counter the combo. And if the combo doesn't get countered, it's like they were putting up so many interruptions. And at that time, it's like people weren't used to playing through that many interruptions. We've been in formats before where you had to play through a lot, but it's like spirals were doing it with 2 cards. That's what made it really, that's what really made it so dominant and powerful, the fact that they could do it so consistently with 2 cards, and they could nearly just deny you the right from playing, not by taking your hand away, or not by telling you can't activate monster effects, by putting up so many negations and interruptions that you had to sacrifice so much from your hand before you got a chance to play. It was really, people called it degenerate, people complained and whined, but because spirals were so powerful, people basically conformed to playing a ton of hand traps. And around that time, if you played in the spiral format, people used to complain saying, this is hand trap format, this is hand trap format, hand trap dead, oh, I can't play without hand traps. You would hear these common these common complaints that a lot of people said, you can't play this format without hand traps. If you don't pay to play, you're not gonna win. You have to have Ash Blossoms, you have to have Joels, at that time, people were playing Ash Blossom, Drone Lockbird, and Cypher Gear Gamma were like some of the most popular hand traps at the time. Ghost Ogre was even incredible. It was still strong in Dracos. It was extremely strong in Pendulums. It was still strong against Spirals to a certain extent. But you had Ash Blossom, Ogre, Drone Lockbird, and Cypher Gear Gamma, and Max C was still around. People were playing a ton of hand traps. You started to see decks come off the woodworks as hand trap decks, hand trapped invoked. You had started seeing blind going second strategies because evenly matched came out. Like, this was all circuit breakers. Circuit breakers also released double helix. So like Spirals really changed the format, and I think people, you have to give the credit to Spirals because it was because of that deck's existence and the sheer looming threat of me being paired against a Spiral player that I had to main deck so many hand traps because I did not want to lose to that degenerate combo. And after Spirals left the forefront of the meta and they were, you know, power crept low-key, and they've kind of just shifted from a meta deck to a rogue deck, the format continued to stay the same the way people continue to play so many hand traps. And it's like, before Spirals came out, you didn't see people playing Ash Blossom, Droll, and Gamma, and Effect Veiler, and Ghost Ogre, but now you've gotten to a point where it's become so common of a thing that most of the time people don't even realize. Not too long ago, we weren't really, and it's like, I understand that Ash Blossom didn't exist. There are hand traps that came out later on, like Ash Blossom and Ghost Bell are like newer hand traps, but like Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries was another hand trap that was played in Spiral format, and it kind of just, it made it more popular, and it got to that point where now where you see the format now, like, don't get me wrong, not too many people are playing hand traps currently as things stands, but not too long ago, it was a lot of hand traps being played, and it still is. You're going to see it in the playing field. It's become to a point where hand traps are a staple, like rice and beans for your meal, right? Like, for example, or like how you need bread for your sandwich, or you need condiments for your sandwich. Like, that's what hand traps have become for every single deck out here in the playing field. Don't get me wrong, some people acknowledge that, like, you can play without hand traps in your main deck, but people always have to have hand traps somewhere in the side deck or the main deck because you can't lose to degeneracy. And degeneracy was not so popular. In fact, even the best, most eloquent decks were not telling you can't play Yu-Gi-Oh! They were just putting up interactions, and that's like, you know, that's promoting healthy Yu-Gi-Oh! Like, let's play, let's interact with each other, let's see who can skillfully outwit each other in a strategic manner. Like, is my strategy gonna overcome yours? Did my tactics, were they effective enough? You know, but it's become to this point now where you will always see FTKs, but FTKs were so prevalent. After Spiral format, like, you started to see a ton of FTKs. Firewall became such a degenerate card that it got hit to one and then had to get banned, and people were playing Winter Cherry for Firewalls because it was so bad. Like, it's just, Spirals initially started the trend of playing a ton of hand traps, and then every deck forced you to follow suit, because what Konami did was they set the standard in the bar so high that every deck that they made after Spirals had to be in, not necessarily in equivalence, but it had to be comparable, and not like a reminiscent of Spirals, but it had to be comparable. Like, Konami can never ever make an incredible deck and then every other deck they make after that is weaker. Like, they continue, if you notice this trend, Yu-Gi-Oh continues to evolve, and we have to adapt to every format, and cards become more and more powerful on release. Like, Konami's trying to balance it out now, but like, they've continued to make insanely incredible cards. I mean, broken cards. I mean, heck, when Solemn Strike came out, people were like, Jesus, this card needs to be banned. And now, like, Solemn Strike, even though it's a still good card, it's like, it's seeing very little play because they've made so much more. Like, they're continuing, and it's like, yeah, Strike's a great card, so I don't want to say it's bad, but like, the point is that we thought Strike was broken, right? And then they started making cards that just like make Strike look like it's just like a chill, like, it's crazy, dude. And they continue to make these more and more powerful and broken cards, and just, it's so hard for them to balance it because now everything that they make has to be comparable to what's been made in the past. And Spirals initially are what they impacted the meta in that degree, in that extent, that where before we didn't see a lot of hand shots being played, it became a thing now. Now it's just a thing, it's a trend. Like, Sky Sharkers are gonna play a ton of hand traps. Almost every competitive meta deck, even Altergeist, they're gonna play hand traps. And it's not because, oh, every deck's just so degenerate and they're not letting you play Yu-Gi-Oh! There are certain decks like that, but it's like hand traps are now being used as a tool to simplify the game state, where a lot of people didn't do that before. Like, before Ash Blossom came out, Ghost Ogre, Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries, Joel and Lockbird, and Effect Veiler and DD Crow were still great hand traps that could have been played even in full power Zodiac format. Like, Ash Blossom came in Maximum Crisis. Zodiacs came out in Raging Tempest. Raging Tempest was before Maximum Crisis. So in Zodiac format, Ghost Ogre was incredible. Ghost Reaper and Winter Cherries was incredible. Effect Veiler was just a great card in general, just being able to deny you from getting your Broad Bull search. It was still a great card. DD Crow for the Rapier was incredible. Even Droll and Lockbird was really good against specific decks that relied too much on searching, which was really insane. So, like, you had all these hand traps. So it's like, I say that to say this. Don't think, oh, well, the reason why people play more hand traps is because more hand traps exist. There were so many hand traps that existed around that time that were really impactful that there was no reason for people to not play them. It's just people didn't have that mindset yet. People didn't have that mindset like, wow, we struggle going second. We can adapt by incorporating hand traps into the strategy that we play. Now it's to the point where if you're not playing hand traps in some way, shape, or form, you're at a disadvantage because people will have them and you won't have them. And I think that's how I'm going to just wrap up the video because I don't want it to be too long. But that's the long story short, the gist of it. That Spirals really did shake things up, and it has never been the same since Spiral format. Whether you agree or disagree, you know, I just ask this. Show some respect. If you want to share your opinion, just at least share your opinion in a respectful way. And try not to, like, you know, hate somebody or attack somebody just because they're saying something that you don't agree with. I don't mind if you disagree with me, and we can talk things out, and we can come to, you know, somewhat of an understanding between one another. But I'm just asking, just because you may disagree with me doesn't mean that you have to be a troll or be, you know, like a douchebag. But yeah, I'm gonna end the video on just basically talking about, like, you know, just reiterating the point that Spirals really did shake things up, and ever since Spirals, it hasn't really been the same. And like, while somebody can say the counter argument could be like, oh yeah, people played hand traps, Ash Blossom and Ghost Ogre, like around that era. If you weren't playing around that era, look at deck profiles from around that era. You'll notice a trend. The hand traps being played were Ash Blossom, Ghost Ogre, and the one of Max C. You weren't seeing a ton of hand traps at that time. You weren't seeing like, oh, like 6 is not really a lot, but like when Spirals came out, you think I'm lying? Dude, there were even going second Spiral strategies that played Gammas, Drolls, Winter Cherries, and Ash Blossoms. There was hand trap invoked dot decks that were literally playing Ash Blossom, Ghost Ogre, Droll and Lockbird, Cypher, Gear Gamma, and Winter Cherries, and like 2 ofs. Like Ediception had a list that played like 2 of each of those hand traps. Like it's crazy, dude. Like that's, and the format has never been the same ever since then because it came to a point where now certain hand traps are just staples and absolutely have to be played. And Ash Blossom being released, you know, changed things up a little bit, but in general, the main point that I wanted to reiterate was that it's Spirals that really changed and shaked the format up, and it hasn't been the same since. God bless you guys. Make good choices. Don't hurt your brain cells. Stay tuned for future content. You folks have a beautiful day. Definitely stay positive, all right? And don't join the gang. Peace out, yo.